Hey, I hope you're having a wonderful day so far. It's sunny here. It's springtime. I just had lunch on the river. I've now come home to have a late afternoon coffee, of which I'll tell you about the 4 books. Yes, only 4 books that I read in the month of March. I'm really excited to recommend these to you because I think most, if not all of them, are like really, really great and have a lot of universal appeal. So, as always, if you're interested in my thoughts on a specific title, the timestamps are down below. The first book that I finished in March got me out of my reading slump. It was a 5-star read. I thought it would be amazing, and it was amazing. It blew me away. It was more than what I thought it could be. I knew it would be good, and then it just exceeded my expectations. And that is Our Wives Under the Sea. Oh my god, I loved this. I loved this so much. So the premise of this book is we're following alternating chapters from in first person perspective, first person narration, alternating between Miri and Leah. So Miri stayed at home for the past few months, waiting for Leah to come back from her work trip. Leah's work trip was a deep sea expedition where things went wrong. And instead of lasting 3 weeks as it was supposed to, it went on for months and months. In fact, Miri had assumed that Leah was dead. Like, that's how long it went on. So the book is structured by where we get from Miri's perspective from the moment Leah comes home to what happens next. And from Leah's perspective, we get to find out what happened before the trip all the way to the great event that changed her. This book is written so beautifully and is so full of like grief and longing, which I love. I wanted to highlight so much in this book, which really sucked because it was a library book that I got in my Kobo, and I need a physical copy because I need to reread this and annotate it. There were just so many beautiful lines about loss, about love, about the fear of the immensity of the unknown. This book focuses on the horror of the deep sea and how little we know about the darkness of the deep sea and what's unexplored, and how terrifying and beautiful and sublime that really is. Absolutely gorgeous. But the book also focuses on what do you do, the feeling of loneliness that you have when you're watching your loved ones suffer, wither away, be it from an illness or from something else consuming them, and being helpless and being alone, where other people don't necessarily understand what is happening with you and in your life, and there's no way you can even explain that to other people. So we have these like relatively gruesome scenes where Leah starts like having blood come out of her pores and she vomits up salt water and she needs to be in the tub of water all the time. It's like she's become like dependent on the sea. She stops eating. She will only drink salt water. And Mary's watching this and she's just trying to adapt and she's trying to get in touch with Leah's employers to find out like what can she do, what's happening, like is this an expected side effect, how can she help her wife. And she just keeps coming up roadblock after roadblock after roadblock and keeps falling in this like really existential despair. I won't ruin the rest of the book for you, but I do want to say it was absolutely gorgeous. Like, this was such a 5-star read. This is like exactly what I'm looking for in my life when I am looking for a sad book. The cover is beautiful, and like the cover is really evocative of the emotions that I felt while reading this. I absolutely, absolutely loved it. I absolutely loved it. Like, 5 stars across the board. In my Goodreads review, I specifically recommend this to you if the deep sea both fascinates and scares you. The idea of losing a loved one without them being dead fills your heart with immeasurable ache. And if experiencing that dread, fear, grief in beautiful prose sounds like your idea of a good time. If those apply to you, run, don't walk. It's so good. It's so good. And that's basically what people had told me about this next book, and I knew that I would like this book, so I went in with pretty high expectations, and I listened to it on audiobook, and that is Beartown by Fredrik Backman. And now that I've listened to it, I can't wait for the next 2 of the trilogy. I'm so excited for them. Because I just love the way, did I call him Richard? Fredrik. I love the way that Fredrik Backman tells stories because he tells you the ending. He starts off by telling you the ending, and then tells you how we got there, and then tells you how we got there again, and then he tells you that again, and then again, from a bunch of different perspectives until you build this rich tapestry of all the key players involved. And you have characters who make good decisions, bad decisions, who are kind to others, horrible to some, and you have this wonderful complexity of humanity and competing interests. So that's basically what I have noticed in Bachman's writing that I really, really like. And the way he explores this in Beartown is that he focuses on a town that is in the middle of the woods and has a dying economy, a housing crisis, just things are not good. But the town is betting on their junior hockey team, a bunch of 16-year-olds who are really, really, they have like one star player who's like really excellent. And they also have a couple of other like really strong players. And they think, if we can win, then maybe the state or the region or whatever will invest more money into a hockey club for us. That might bring some jobs, that might bring a specialized school, that might help like with the economy. So it's not just about a game, it's literally about getting the economy of the town back and getting life in the town back in. So we follow these teenage boys on the team, and they do things that teenage boys do, including some terrible things that most teenage boys don't do, but unfortunately some of them do. So we follow the teenage boys on this team and go through their aches, their pains, their good decisions, and their really, really bad decisions, and the fallout of one really bad decision. So this is not a spoiler because you find this out relatively early on, and it's relatively clear, I would say, from the synopsis of the book, is that one of the star players assaults a girl at a party. And once news of this gets out, the whole town reels. But the whole town reels for all the wrong reasons. And the book begins to explore how do people respond to this girl coming forward and talking about what happened to her. How does she respond? How does the guy who assaulted her respond? How do their parents, each of their respective parents, respond? The hockey coach, the teachers. And while it's a book about sexual assault, and I do think it was treated with a lot of respect and a lot of compassion, it's also just a book about competing interests and who do you protect, where do your loyalties lie, and what does it mean to be human and to love people, and to love people who do terrible things or who might hold values that you didn't know that they held that might surprise you. Like, what breaks loyalties, what keeps loyalties going. All of this is explored really beautifully, and yeah, I just really, really liked it. I just really liked it. So this was another 5-star read. I was like having the best reading time ever. I cried multiple times reading this book. It was amazing. So I recommend this to you if you think that you would never be interested in reading a book about hockey, because that's how I feel. I'm a very bad Canadian in that way. But even if you're not interested in hockey, if you are interested about questions about whether we should prioritize the needs of the collective versus the needs of the individual, if you love character-driven plots, and if you want to spend some time in a small frozen town in the woods that puts all of its hopes in a handful of teenagers, and this town lives and breathes and comes off the page, then I absolutely recommend this to you. Absolute 5-star read. Just, I loved it. I can't wait for the next 2 books. Like, I'm so excited, and I'll probably watch the TV adaptation. Honestly, it's so good. Forgive me that I gave this 4 stars. So I finished reading the trilogy Lilith's Brood, which is Dawn, Adult Rights, I think, Adult Rituals, Adult Rights, Human Rights, something like that, and Imago. I really liked the first book. I liked the first book a lot, and then the other 2 were fine, but not my favorites. So let me actually tell you what this lovely thing is about, and I will just be putting the covers up here because as much as I like the trilogy, and especially like the typeface is like very satisfying and nice to read. I do find the individual covers are really pretty, so I'll pop them up here. So the first book is Dawn, and in Dawn we follow our main character Lilith, who wakes up in a sort of like weird room, and there is an alien creature watching her. And this alien creature is an Oankali. That's how I choose to pronounce it. I don't know how we're supposed to pronounce it, so it's an Oankali. And this creature is watching her and is trying to get her to be comfortable with it. And I say it because in this species there are 3 sexes. There's a male, a female, and an Ooloi. And an Ooloi is exactly who is watching her. So this species, when it reproduces, it mixes genetic material with other species and inserts a sort of Ooloi mitochondria. So the Ooloi, the 3rd sex, what it does is it merges gametes and also inserts its own sort of mitochondrial package that also allows it to like select genes, maternal, paternal, and also turn off and on any like risk genes, stuff like that. The genetics aren't that detailed, but that's kind of the idea, is that it can basically petri dish the next generation. And so the Oankali, the species, is super obsessed with like genetics and genetic diversity. So Lilith finds out that the reason that these aliens have picked her up for this room is Earth basically nuclearly annihilated itself. I don't remember if nuclear annihilation is just implied. There's a lot of like, war happened and just a few of you survived. So the Oankali basically saw that human beings were an endangered species and brought them on their ship and put them in a state of suspended animation, cured all their illnesses, cured all their defective genes. Like there's a lot going on about how Lilith has a lot of oncogenes, meaning she's very susceptible to cancer, and that this is corrected while she is in stasis before the book even begins. And so what they want to do is essentially similar to human beings who take pandas from the wild, breed them in captivity, and then release them back into the wild in a controlled way. They want to do this with humans. So what our Ooloi focuses on doing is befriending Lilith so that Lilith can then teach a bunch of other humans about this purpose so that they can form a little 50-person village that can safely be sent back to Earth now that Earth has recovered. It's several centuries since the like nuclear annihilation. Everyone's been in stasis, so no one's dead. Stasis. Everyone's been in stasis, so no one's dead. And now they're trying to repopulate Earth. So Lilith's like, all right, we're gonna do this. She's super freaked out and doesn't want to do it, but eventually decides to. And that's really what the first book focuses on. But there's a lot of these implications about, well, what's going to happen with the next generation. And this is where we get into books 2 and 3. So in book 2, we follow the beginning of the next generation, where now the way that human reproduction is working is you need, I'm going to mess this up. The way that reproduction now works for humans is you need a human female, a human male, an Oankali female, an Oankali male, and an Ooloi, so like the 3rd sex of the Oankali, to do all the genetic mixing. So everyone has 5 parents, and they can be gestated either by the human female or by the Oankali female. Just like, bear with me. So the second book follows the first male construct, which is what we're calling the hybrids of humans and Oankali, who is gestated by Lilith, so a human female. And we don't know how he's going to develop and sort of what his level of humanity is. So we're now on Earth, and most humans are living with the Oankali in peace, but some are like, heck no, I don't want anything to do with these weird aliens who are covered in tentacles. Yes, there's a lot of tentacle sex in this. I don't want anything to do with these tentacle aliens. I'm going to go live in the wilderness. However, because of the Oankali's intervention, humans actually can't reproduce without them anymore. So they're sterile. They're immortal, essentially. Like they don't age. They can be like killed by a gun or whatever, but they don't really age or die natural death. Um, but they're sterile and they can't reproduce, so they're kind of dead inside, and they choose to sometimes kidnap children if they look human enough. You see where I'm going with this. So that's really what book 2 focused on, and then book 3 was a little bit of a rehash of the same ideas as book 2, however, like even more into the future. So now instead of following a child of Lilith who is male, we follow a child of Lilith who is Ooloi, and who is the first human-born Ooloi construct. So they're like the third sex. But also a lot of these politics between the humans that have accepted that they're now going to be hybrids with this alien race, the humans who don't want to be hybrids with this alien race, as well as a group of humans who've been sent to Mars, where they're allowed to do whatever they want and they're not sterile anymore over there, and they can just mess up Mars, as the Untitled see it. So the major theme in the whole trilogy is this paternalism, this idea of the Onkali, the aliens, know what's best for humanity, and therefore will control humanity, will do genetic manipulation, will control reproduction, will control basically everything, but in a it's for your own good kind of way. And they're not presented as good and they're not presented as evil. It's just sort of really the closest thing I can think of is the way we do conservation efforts as a society, like bringing pandas or endangered Siberian tigers or whatever into a zoo, and then breeding them and releasing them or tagging them, seeing what's going on. I'd never read a post-humanist novel before, so this definitely was a lot of food for thought, and it was definitely really weird. I did enjoy it. I'm not gonna lie, I did enjoy it a lot. I like the writing style a lot. I liked Dawn a lot more than I liked the other 2 books, which is why I ended up lowering my star rating for the whole trilogy. Dawn was a 5-star, the other 2 were like 3.5s. So I went with a 4 star for this, just because it felt a little bit repetitive and it felt a little less interesting. But I do really highly recommend Dawn if you're interested in picking this up, because it just explores what does it mean to be human. Doesn't matter, do those definitions change? What does transhumanism look like? What can transhumanism look like? How would we interact with an alien race who's benevolent but paternalistic towards us? Here's a little excerpt from a Goodreads review. The Onkali do what they do for humanity's own good, treat humans with love, and know, or they believe, that this is what is best for the human species. They're like zookeepers rescuing endangered species, breeding and engineering them, and then setting them free so that they escape extinction. But is that ethical to do when the species longs for self-determination? And that's essentially it. So I do recommend this. It's really weird. I wouldn't recommend it as your first foray into Octavia Butler. If you tolerated the weirdness of Fledgling, you're gonna find a lot of similarity here. I found a lot of the themes and the tones most similar to what I read of Fledgling, and I've now read most of Octavia Butler's stuff. I only have Seeds to Harvest left, which I hope to read this year as well, because yeah, I just love her writing. It's so good. I'm really sad to say that my next book was a flop. This book was really hyped up to me. It's This Time Tomorrow by Emma Straub, and it was compared to some of my favorite books, notably the time travel books or post-apocalyptic books that Emily St. John Mandel has written. So I was really excited. The premise of this book is that we follow our main character, whose name I don't even remember anymore because I want to erase this book from my brain. We follow our main character, who is about to turn 40. But when she wakes up on her 40th birthday, she instead wakes up on her 16th and gets to relive that day, make different choices, so that then when she's transported back to being 40, she gets to re-experience the effects of those choices. And the whole kicker is that her dad is a science fiction writer who is very famous for a time travel story. That's essentially it. That's essentially it. So what I really didn't like about this is that it took itself really seriously, this book. Like, it took itself really, really seriously. So there was a lot of, like, "Oh, there's no such thing as, like, the right choice." Like, yes, little choices will affect the grand scheme of things, but you can never know what the ultimate best scenario is. Um, because basically she's able to keep going back to being 16 and then to being 40 and then to being 16, seeing the consequences at 40, being 16, see the consequences at 40, etc., 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 keeps trying to, like, engineer her perfect life. And really, it's like the moral of the story is you can't engineer a perfect life. The options will just be different, but not necessarily better or worse, just different. Um, I don't know, I found it really redundant and kind of frustrating to read past a certain point, especially because there was a lot of reference to other time travel stories, like a lot of talk of Back to the Future, for example, a couple of other like time travel movies, and it just didn't feel, how do I put it? The amount of pop culture references almost made it feel like the author was trying to say, see, I'm not doing that. I know you think you've seen this before, but I'm not doing that. And it just felt like the author was talking to me the whole time in a way that I couldn't actually get into the story. So that was my experience with this. I don't really recommend it. I gave this 2 stars. I think that if you're really into time travel stories and if you're going through a little bit of a midlife crisis and that you feel like a simple story like that might be helpful to you, this could be good. And like the writing isn't bad, it's just not, it's not breathtaking, I guess. I went into this expecting something in the vein of Emily St. John Mandel because that's how this was sold to me, so I expected that level of breathtaking writing, and I just didn't get that here. It was a lot more flat. I guess a lot more flat, a lot more direct, largely forgettable. Again, I couldn't tell you the main character's name right now off the top of my head. In my Goodreads review, I wrote recommended if you are looking for a Hallmark time travel story, which feels like such an insult. Um, but I stand by it. So that was it for March. It was actually a really, really good reading month. Like, I read 2 books that are now among my favorites, like Our Wives Under the Sea and Beartown were both incredible, and I'm so just happy about them, and I can't wait to start recommending them to people, which is why I wanted to recommend them to you. Please tell me what your favorite book this month was, like your last sort of like, oh my gosh, 5-star read. This is amazing. Um, I'm always looking to add books to my TBR, even though that's also counterproductive against my excessive sense of ambition. So it's kind of a give and take. I hope you have a really fantastic rest of your day. I hope you read an amazing book soon and have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. Okay, bye.